Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome back. Always a joy and a delight to have with us in the studio Dr. Joel Klein. He's with Ventana Wellness, and we got something to talk about today that I think there is a connection. I was talking to Joel. I said, you know, in my earlier days when I was a pastor on staff of a large church in Sacramento, and I do a lot of counseling, and people come in, the first thing I'd ask them is, you know, when's the last time you went to the doctor? Because it very well could be you're low on vitamin B, you know, they're out of gas, they're out of energy, everything's wrong, nothing's right, you know.
Right. Well, I think, you know,
and they want a quick prayer and have it all go away.
Right. and it really, over the years, I've seen it work in both directions. Yeah. Certainly, one of my favorite areas is really how people's emotional health, what I like to call it psycho-spiritual, only because it rolls off the tongue better than spiritual, psychic, but that they're obviously completely entwined. And the issues that go on there clearly affecting physical health, and actually in my experience in very metaphorical ways that are in our language, as we call them figures of speech, but I think, you know, they express real phenomenon. If you're having troubles with digestion, what are you stomaching in your life? Or people with arthritis in their neck, well, who or what is the pain in your neck? Yeah. Candace Pert, who actually is a neuroscientist who discovered the opioid receptor in the nervous system, but has done some very interesting work. She has come so far as to say what we call our unconscious mind is actually just our body. That there's not like this different unconscious mind somewhere. It's literally the body. We know that the body, you know, a lot of neurochemicals are produced in the body. Now, they don't all necessarily get into the brain. But I see these things all the time. So certainly the spiritual health showing up, or spiritual dis-ease showing up in the body as dis-ease or illness, and then the other way around. And this is something, the more I've worked with people, that when they're just physically not doing well, and let's say there's some issues in their life that they're having difficulty coping with, or they know the spiritual place to get to, but they just can't get there, and actually helping them physically, especially with fatigue issues and all that, when we work with people's digestion and their hormones and all that, and they feel physically better, they are much more able, the body now can support them in doing the spiritual work. So absolutely, it works
So
both
what
ways.
You're saying is that there is a connection between your health and your spiritual health.
Absolutely.
Physical health and your spiritual health.
I believe they are just flip sides of the same coin, actually, and our brains can't wrap them around that one as well. It's a holistic view. It's not as if like it's one affecting the other. They are just different aspects of the same totality.
Because I've often said, I think physical health, as it relates to your spiritual health, is a stewardship issue too. I mean, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you might have a prayer life, but if you don't have some kind of a physical workout life, what are you doing to yourself, you know?
Right, and it's actually...
And if you're not eating right,
I think it's a reflection. I think we can use whatever the barriers are to people taking care of their physical health are usually those same barriers that affect the way they deal with the other issues in their life. So you can have this kind of sequestered away in terms of prayer and on your own, but how well are you practicing it? What's happening in your life?
Right.
And I find that the way we relate to our bodies is frequently the way we relate to other people as well.
So there is a toxicity, so to speak, that we allow into our thinking, into our brain, into our soul and spirit, as much as we do allow into our bodies by eating bad things. Absolutely.
By the same token, it's very interesting. Because, you know, people who eat bad things and do pretty well.
Well, they live long, too.
Well, you know, and I tell people it's really because they're obviously there are no guarantees. See, we all want the shortcut, how do I avoid, as we know that's not there. But that if people are happy, they tend to detoxify better.
Right.
So that's what's interesting. And I've had patients who thought it should be, well, I ate right and I did everything right, and yet they still got sick. And it's as if that's an affront. Like, I did everything right. This should not happen to me. And not necessarily, but the odds are better.
Yeah.
And certainly, I like even the saying from the Ayurvedic doctors in India, who will say if you're unhappy, the most healthy diet will still get turned into toxins.
Yeah. Okay. Now, that comes back to attitude.
Right.
You know, and I've seen people go into bad health with a good attitude and come out okay. I've seen people go into bad health with a bad attitude and get worse.
Right. Yeah, the odds, typically people who go in with a bad attitude, now unless God has this as a lesson for them, that they come out on the other side, but it's less likely they're going to come out with a good outcome. Certainly. Having the good attitude, it doesn't guarantee you.
Right.
There may be a lesson in there too, but certainly having the bad attitude pretty much is one more obviously acting against you. And we can even talk about this even biochemically and what happens with excessive secretions of stress hormones that literally cause the body to break down. That's what stress hormones do. They break us down in an effort to keep us going. And if those stress hormones are going all the time, you're not healing.
So Joel, when do you say to a patient, you realize, wait a minute, there's something else going on here besides what I'm trying to treat you for physically? You ever just stop somebody and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on in your life?
Actually, I usually ask them that in the very beginning.
And
a lot of the times. Well, it all depends.
Do you get the truth?
Sometimes I do when they get that they're not going to get a judgmental lecture, that I'm actually going to hear them and see what's going on. I'll tell you, certainly every patient I come into who all of a sudden said, well, for the past 3 years, everything has gone downhill. So when did kind of all this start? Well, it started around this time. What was going on in your life in the 6 to 12 months before all this started? Oh my God, there was always there's a story of a stress or something else, yes, that happened with that. So for those patients, I'm exploring it in the beginning. For other patients, no, I'm not exploring it unless, yes, we're coming up against a wall, or like I can have an intuitive feel of there's something else going on here, and we'll also kind of feel out if there's an opening for me to explore that with the person or not. And I may, depending, I can feel out people pretty well, and I know folks that I can like go right in there, and other folks it's like I'll open the door just a little tiny bit and see if they bite or not.
Yeah, you know, I just sitting here and listening to you, and I thought, you know, maybe what I ought to do is a show sometime with you and Patrick Doyle, because he's dealing with the soul and the spirit, and you're dealing with the physical body, and at the same time, you're probably talking to the same person.
I think we're dealing with health, and health encompasses all of it.
Right.
I'm more of an expert in dealing with the physical aspect of it, but I've learned a lot about how that is affected and how that relates to the spiritual aspect.
So that comes back to the fact that we're living in a culture that is really, really stressed out.
Right.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, life is crazy.
It is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
It really takes a conscious effort to carve out your space into that, because if you buy into the mass thinking and what's happening with that, you will get pulled right along and right down the tube with it.
Where does, and Patrick will tell you that there's only two things that's going to make you change: inspiration or desperation. You're either going to be inspired to change or you're going to become desperate to change. Would you kind of agree with that?
Absolutely. And I guess in my line of work, I usually see the latter more than the former, because the folks in the former just all get there and do it. The folks of me are like at their last, are desperate, and it's tricky. I don't want to completely remove what's pushing them in a direction if they're doing something, if the marriage is not working, if their job doesn't support them, if whatever it is they're doing, I don't want to just cover that up and allow them to keep doing the same thing, but at the same time I want to help relieve the suffering, but in a way that actually fosters their growth. And obviously that's the tricky part, that I have to feel each visit, each person is going to be at a different place with that.
Where is the obvious or the beginning signs of a spiritual or emotional unhealthy person? Where does it usually show up first physically?
That's what's different from every person.
Really?
Yes, and I think it has to do with that own person. This is where some of that metaphorical language comes in, is what I expect. Everybody, like we talked about right at the end of the last show that we did, how anger issues will commonly show up in liver, gallbladder. Chinese medicine talks about this, but everybody's different. And that's the point. So that's what makes it tricky. There's not one place. We're all built differently. Our physiologies work differently. We may have different weak links in the chain. So it pays to pay attention.
Because I hear people say, I know I got all these problems, but I just don't have the willpower to change. What would you say to that person? Come see me when you're overweight?
No.
Or in the hospital?
As you know, this is where the truth will set people free.
Yeah.
And what I would support them is we always do, whether we like to admit it or not, what we're committed to. Mm. And so you get to look at, based on the results of your life right now, that's what you're committed to. Start looking at that. And if we are being victims of, because everything is a choice. Mm-hmm. The only choice that you don't have is whether you're going to eventually die or not.
Right.
Other than that, it's always a choice. Now, it may not be a good choice or look like one, but it's still a choice. Why are you choosing what you're choosing? And look into that, because we all have the willpower to do exactly what we want to do. So what's in the way? There are going to be beliefs, there's some unhealthy thinking that people are putting in front of them that will go along the line of, or it's a behavior pattern they're used to, and they have to really see that they're used to being victims, and that's actually where they're comfortable. Or they're worried about what will people think. Tribal loyalty in the family. There's all kinds of, people who step outside the family think are ostracized from the tribe. Our mentality still goes from that. So it really comes down to, and this is where people either need to do spiritual counseling, psychotherapy, to look at what are the issues that are motivating them to do what they're doing now. Because once they can understand that a little better and actually experience it, then a moment of more choice evolves.
Because I think, and I want to say this with all due respect, I think there is a part of the Christian faith that we have not recognized, and that is that there is a connection between the spiritual and the physical. We thought that the spiritual should dominate the physical, and maybe it should if it's in proper perspective. But we don't allow ourselves to connect those dots, I think that's a mistake.
I used to think that. I went to medical school with the last group of hippies. Now, we approached it from a new age version of that, but it was the same thing. I thought it was all in people, and then all in people's heads, or that thing. But then I saw the other side of it, and I saw people get better with medical treatment that then were able to deal with those spiritual issues better. So there's not one right rule. And yes, you can use, that's when you can get into, there's a balance. There's absolute truth in that.
All right. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back with Dr. Joel Klein. We're talking about the connection of your health and your spiritual condition. There is a connection, and we have some other questions for him. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Dr. Joel Klein, and we're talking about the connection of your spiritual health and your physical health. And whether you like to admit it or not, there is a connection. And I can tell you, as a person who's done a lot of counseling in the past, pastoral counseling, lay counseling, I don't do a lot of it now. I give it to you and Patrick.
But I give it more to Patrick. I do what I can.
Yeah, but I really think in the future I will do a show with the two of you, because I think it would be really a tremendous benefit to see the connection, because Patrick will sit here and tell you that a lot of the stuff he does as a counselor is directly connected to their physical health. Yep. And there is a huge connection.
Yes, and a lot of what I do to their physical is directly due to their spiritual, mental and spiritual health.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there is a stress there. Okay, such things as emotions, anger, stress, addictions. They all connect, don't they?
All these things. The whole word, I would like to, unfortunately, it was helpful when it was coined, but I find it useful because now we get to use this word stress and we don't have to look at what is that.
Yeah.
What are we calling stress? In my experience is most stress comes from either anger or fear, and actually maybe fear is the root of all of it, but it's one of those two that's going to predominate. So again, what are we taking? Where's the ego involved? What are we taking personally? And then also, and yes, fear has to do with surrender, and that would be the ultimate spiritual challenge. But all those hormones that are secreted there absolutely have deleterious longer-term effects. They were meant to save us in the short run, from an acute danger, but when constantly secreted over time, break down and accelerate the body, accelerate aging, all these different problems.
Have you ever told somebody chill out, take a walk, cool off?
Not quite like that, because I've lived this, so I know it's not that easy. You really have to approach, and people, again, if you're going to have a useful, because quite frankly with that, if somebody is also, if they're already shame-based, which a lot of people have been shamed, and you go, you're wrong, you need to do something else, all you've done is give them more shame.
Okay.
So if anything, I give them the opposite and try to give them more permission to be who they are, but then look at what would support them and permission to ask for what it is they need, because most of the time they're used to subjecting or submitting, but deep down maybe resenting it and looking forward about drawing healthy boundaries.
Joel, you really touched a nerve there. Permission to be who they are. Wow, because a part of what Patrick will deal with is, and it's almost an oxymoron, and it's called spiritual guilt, because God doesn't judge. God doesn't put guilt on people. God loves people, but we have this tendency to put guilt. We shouldn't be this way because God doesn't want us that way.
Well, the difference can be dependent between, my wife has pointed this out to me, guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. Guilt can be positive. It can move us into, that wasn't the right thing to do, versus shame, that it actually reflects on who we are, and that who we are as a person is inadequate or wrong and all that. That, I think, is the key difference.
Wow.
Because the shame one obviously goes extremely deep.
I come back to the permission part. That's really,
Sure.
you really touched a nerve there.
Well, I've lived this in my own life, believe me, and struggle with it still every day.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I was, if you look at it, always been a very sensitive but temperamental as a child. And somewhere around the age of 5, I got the message that was wrong. But I never really stopped being it. So there's still this, it's wrong for me to be sensitive, it's wrong for me to be I get a little temperamental, and these things that happen, and it's a daily forgiveness and allowing myself. It's been a lifelong journey for me in that, and those kind of things have shown up in my health. I can tell you during a time, maybe I touched on this last time, during the probably most difficult year of my life, when I was stuffing a lot of anger, but going along with what I felt like I had to do, but I was being angry and resentful about it, and actually was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at that point. I was actually bleeding from my rectum, and but it was all anger. And actually who took care of it was a friend of mine who's a healer in Colorado, who's one of the more gifted people around. And she'll tell you, I'm not a healer, I'm a facilitator. He's the healer, and we're just working through. And we actually worked. This was about the liver and gallbladder. During a session with her, it was burning hot right here. And she does her little maneuver here, pulling the heat out, and my bleeding stopped the next day. And a week later, I get the colonoscopy, and the gastroenterologist comes in and goes, yeah, you got ulcerative colitis changes from your sigmoid all the way down. Oh, isn't that nice? But it was already better, and I knew the emotional connection.
So what did that teach you? What did that tell you?
Well, that's a signal for me. It's that when I get too much into I get my own victimization and martyrdom, and that is a behavioral pattern for me. And when I get too locked into it, so I'll get inflammation. It will show up in my in my bowel habits. It's actually an interesting common theme in my family, from my grandmother to my mother, my brother. Like you said, where does it show up in the body? In our family, it shows up in the bowel. Yeah. Interesting, at least on that side. Other people may get migraine headaches. Other people may get back pain problems. It will show up in all these different places.
Because, you touched on so many things. I know people that suffer from, I've had a migraine, but I've people who suffer from the back issue or the neck issue, and you can do a gazillion x-rays, exams and everything else, and nothing shows up.
And an orthopedic surgeon, John Sarno, even wrote a book about, what's the title of the book? It's something about heal your back, but it was all about the emotional issues. And he's an orthopedic surgeon, and this is what he learned. And again, in the metaphorical sense, I find people commonly with low back pain don't feel supported in their lives. So how does that show up metaphorically in their body? The place of greatest support for them is weak. So these things can be keys to what's going on in my life that might be reflecting here. And there, again, you can't lay these on people, but there are patterns that seem to show up over and over and over.
Where does prayer come in? How do you see that working?
Prayer to me comes in more in the affirmation or the opening up of the realization and the knowledge of what is happening, where is this coming from, and what do I need to do about it.
Okay.
Just for,
but
to me, we're praying for wisdom.
You used the word earlier, surrender.
Right.
So I mean, you're surrendering.
Surrender, absolutely.
To God, yeah.
But first, we need. My opinion is we have to become aware of what it is that we need to surrender to.
Okay, that and what it is you're surrendering of.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yes. Either way. Exactly. Okay. So more. So what? Yeah. And yeah. Where does the holding on come from? Right. Why am I holding on? What is the fear? Or whatever?
Why do we hold on? Why do we hold on to something that we know that's hurting us? Fear for not knowing what the other side is?
And also, the psychologists will tell us there's also something that we get out of it as well, and
Control?
That's the real hard. Well, whatever. It becomes a way. If it's a way of manipulating, a way of avoiding responsibility, it gets us out of things that we don't want to do. So, in psychology, it's called secondary gain. And again, to me, that's where the awareness comes in. And then once the awareness is there, I see prayer as a way of shifting. That's there. Here's where I need to shift. Here's where I need to shift, and that's takes endless practice because these things are literally ingrained in our brain circuits over time.
And I think the other part of this, it goes to where you all are there at Ventana Wellness, is that you'll go first to the natural resources before you go to the chemical resources.
I will go to what the appropriate tool is.
Yeah.
I tell people, if you're drowning, I don't have time for swimming lessons.
Yeah, okay.
So I better throw you the life preserver.
Yeah, right.
So if somebody's blood pressure is 240 over 140, I'm not going to send them out with magnesium pills. I better get them on something before they blow a gasket.
Yeah.
But yes, I always want to look at what's the best tool for the job, both short term and long term, and how do we make you healthier so that if we do have to use medications, do the best we can. There's no guarantee of seeing what we can do from the natural side of diet and stress and supplements and things to make the medications less necessary over time.
This is absolutely fascinating, Joel, because I think that a lot of our spiritual health has to do with our physical health. It's amazing as being a pastor in the past, and you're praying with people and you're consulting people, a lot of it has to do with physical conditions, and I thought, well,
and again,
they get angry with God because he doesn't heal them. Well, wait a minute, time out. Maybe it's because you didn't take care of yourself.
Or maybe there's a lesson in this for you, is why God gave it to you in the first place, and what's the lesson that you're supposed to be learning from this?
Yeah, that doesn't cross theologically with some people, but it's
I
the
understand.
truth.
I understand. I certainly am I'm not the theological expert to get into that, but to me, that's not something that you lay on someone, but there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
You don't automatically go there, but open up. Is there? Somebody said no. I'm not getting anything there.
Yeah.
And other people can open up their lives. They realize the pain in their back was something what they were holding against their mother, or these things. It's not for everyone, but that's the thing. If there was one right way to do it, this job would be a whole lot easier.
Well, folks, it's bigger than a 2-segment program here, but VentanaWellness.com is the website. Dr. Joel Klein, physician there, and if you're looking for a good doctor, here's one right here, and you can call Ventana Wellness or go online at VentanaWellness.com. Fascinating. Would you be open to doing a show with Patrick?
I could do these all day long.
Yeah.
So we could keep, if you would, we want to keep pursuing this avenue for,
I think it would be a hoot, because I think there's some real...
Oh, you told me like with Patrick?
Yeah.
Love to, sure.
Yeah, I think we ought to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, Merry Christmas to
Great,
you.
Merry Christmas
bless
to you, everyone out there.
Okay. We'll do it again
have
soon.
fun.
All right, we'll be right back.